Welcome to episode 15 of the AdQuick Madvertising podcast with Chris and Adam. I'm one of your co-hosts, Chris Gadek, and I'm joined by Adam Singer. In the Madvertising podcast, we cover everything at the intersection of marketing, advertising, and technology. Our guest today, I'm thrilled to have, is Siqi Chen, CEO and founder of Runway Financial. Before that, Siqi was CEO and Chief Product Officer at Sandbox VR. Before that, VP of Growth at Postmates. And before that, Head of Product at Zynga. Welcome, Siqi. Welcome to the pod. How you guys doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Chris and Adam.
Finally. So just for the audience here, Siqi has recently publicly launched Runway Financial to much fanfare. We'll jump into that a little bit later. But to get started, Siqi, mind giving our audience a quick introduction to, how you got to where you are right now? How did Siqi become Siqi? You have quite the Renaissance background.
Oh, that is a long story, but okay. So I majored in math in college, and I majored in it because I was the only Asian person in my friend group who didn't get a good math SAT score. So I chose that major. Worked briefly for NASA in machine vision, and then I've been kind of being a unsuccessful founder for most of my career. So started my first company doing social games on Facebook when the Facebook platform first launched, and Zynga acquired that first company. So I joined Zynga before the IPO and a little bit after, and I was head of product there. And then started another company, and that was a long story too, but we started in mobile games, and eventually we pivoted to a mobile game called Stolen that was shut down by Congress, which is a sad story you can read about in the Washington Post. And then that was acqui-hired by Postmates. So Postmates, I was VP of Growth and Product, and was there for about a year and a half. And then I went to Hong Kong. We were on a fundraising trip with Postmates, and I tried out one of my early investments. Eventually became the company called Sandbox VR. So I went to Hong Kong to work there. Blew my mind. It was the coolest experience I've had since trying out the iPhone. And then COVID hit, which kind of led directly to what I'm doing now. Because when COVID hit, we had to reforecast our financial plan based on how long COVID was expected to be in 2020. We just deployed $30 million of Andreessen's money building out all these stores, and they were all going to launch in March of 2020. And shortly afterwards, I asked our CFO, hey, was there something better we could have used, other than spreadsheets, emailing them back and forth? He's like, no, it's all crap. It's either spreadsheets or Anaplan, which is really heavy. And had the idea to try to build something better, modern, and that's Runway. So that's where I am today.
So Runway is it's a solution similar to Anaplan or Host Analytics. It's what is it? FP&A software, or kind of how would you describe it?
Yeah. So it replaces the spreadsheet that you use to run your business primarily, right? And so that's where we're starting. This spreadsheet is eventually everyone grows out of it for three reasons as a business scales. So one is you have so much data in the company as a company grows. You have HR data, analytics data, marketing data, your expense data, revenue data, and you have to get these data from all these different data sources by hand just to keep your forecast up to date. And so that eventually becomes too time consuming. The business itself becomes more complex, and it becomes hard to maintain your model on a spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. And finally, the most important thing that happens is as a company grows, you have more stakeholders, people who have a say in the inputs in that model, who need to understand the plans of the business. And eventually the spreadsheet doesn't handle that as well. It just becomes too hard to understand and too hard to align on what the plan should be. And so Runway helps with all of those things.
That's incredible. So given that you just launched, what were some of the initial use cases? Because every startup, they use every part of the business uses spreadsheets. How did you think about where to start first? And
yeah, the spreadsheet that everyone starts with is the financial forecast, right? Mm-hmm. When you raise money, investors typically kind of expect some kind of forecast, and so that is the thing that everyone has. That's the thing that is most hard to digest, especially as you scale. So we started from there. But the opportunity and the way we think about what we're building is actually not limited finance. We actually don't think about ourselves as a finance company at all, which is kind of odd if you look at the product today. But the real opportunity we've seen is, if you think about what the spreadsheet actually is, people think of it as like, oh, it's a wall of numbers owned by some accountants, right? But in our view, what the spreadsheet actually is, it's actually software in a weird way.
Mm-hmm.
And so what this software does is it simulates the future, right? It just so happens to be written in Excel formula language, hosted on a spreadsheet. Its software is written by FP&A person or model owner, but it's an incredibly useful piece of software. And it's important because it lets you understand what's going to happen 12 months, 24 months from now for decisions that you make today, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it in that way, it becomes much more broader than a finance tool. This is the core working of the business. It touches everything that a company does, every person who is in it. And so if we do this right, we think we can build an operating system for companies, which is a much broader vision. But if you think about like what the world looks like if we're successful at this task,
Mm-hmm.
people forget that there's not just the finance model that exists in a company. You have a model, the growth team has a model, the product team has a model, the marketing team has a model, the sales team has a model, the engineering team has an engineering hosting cost model. All of these models live completely independently. They don't talk to each other. And so, my buddy John Tian runs com.com, right? And the problem they have is they have product models, and what they want is imagine being able to have a PM make a change to the product that's going to impact retention and see how it flows to the bottom line. That doesn't happen today because the tooling simply isn't there. And that's what we're trying to do at Runway.
That's incredible. Just for the audiences, just so the audience knows, AdQuick is a Runway Financial design partner. We've been trying to get our sales and marketing out of Google Sheets and into Runway, and it's been an absolute blast helping Siqi build out the product and scope out the integrations and such. But I guess my next question for you, Siqi, is when you started your let's just jump straight into the website, because I mean
Chris loves your website. He's obsessed.
I've been so let's tell the backstory. So I was supposed to get my my glamour shot on the website.
It's there now.
It is there now, but the photographer thought I was in San Francisco for some reason, and we had an excellent placeholder. It was a gentleman with a very, very impressive mustache.
Yeah.
And when Siqi punched the new website to production, I immediately my text started blowing up. It's like, oh yeah. Oh, grueling times at AdQuick, huh? Haven't even shaved yet.
Oh man.
But I gotta hand it to you. And Adam, I don't know if you could pull it up or whatever, but probably not. There's probably too much work. But the feedback that I've gotten from the website is like, wow, this is the new Stripe. How is the website that everybody's gonna clone for the next 3 or 4 years? No pressure. But so can I walk me through the design process on that? Like, how did you think about building out an experience that's starkly different than a whole bunch of the other websites we see in our space?
Yeah, I mean, we got to hand it to our head of design and design partners. So our head of design is a person named Wells Riley. He was also head of design and product at Envoy, pretty storied, well-regarded company known for good design. And we work with Reform Collective as well to conceive of the website as well as develop it. And they've also worked on the Sandbox VR website. So I've been a fan of their work for quite some time. But yeah, so the inspiration for the website really comes down to our mission and brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
What we want to do is make business accessible and understandable to everyone. That's literally the mission statement of Runway. And so when we thought about how we want that to be expressed in the form of our brand and our website, we thought it was incredibly important that it showcases the fact that this software is designed for people, right? Mm-hmm. Not just like stock photographs that's not relatable of people in suits, right?
White guy shaking a black guy's hand, thumbs up.
Right. So that was one thing. Another big trait is because we are a fairly product-driven company, right? People use products, and we're really inspired by extremely high-quality modern products, things like Notion and Figma. Mm-hmm. And I could talk a lot about the things that those products have inspired us. So we thought it was really important that we showcase the product. That's front and center. It's really frustrating when you go to an enterprise website and there is no product at all, right? And so a lot of our thinking around this is like, how can we be different, right? There was a thread criticizing our website, I think on Twitter, about like, oh, it's not going to convert. I assure you it does convert. But I think like the thing about best practices is like, if everyone is doing the same best practice, it becomes mid, and there's an opportunity to do something completely different. And on a broader level is going to deliver much higher impact. So we thought a lot about that. What can we do that's new and different and reflects our brand and our mission? And that's kind of what led to the website.
I think the biggest risk of launching any website is that no one talks about it. So the fact that you took a chance on something and people said things, whether positively or negatively, the worst thing that could have happened is no one even says anything, right? So I think it's cool, and I think it's a win. Even if people were critical, that means they obviously are interested enough to share it. So
this is true. Yeah, we have been flooded with inbound, and we are backed up for many months right now.
Yes,
haters down bad.
Yeah. I mean, going back to what you were saying, Siqi, like, you led up a growth department before, like you use a channel too much, it gets saturated, or everybody piles into a certain channel, and it gets more expensive and you lose efficacy, right? So it's like, we see it all the time in marketing. Paid social is a perfect example. So, I mean, I love that you took this approach, and the cute little boarding passes are a nice touch, and the animations are just insane. Where was I going to go next with? So when you were thinking about when you were thinking about the layout of the website, did you use this traditional framework of like, here are the benefits, here's what it plugs into, here's how you can get in touch, or did you kind of think about it differently?
We consulted like what are the best practices, and so we wanted to have all the components, right? The social proof, the benefits, the personas, the features. But it's really important for us that we tell a story. And so it actually started with a story, with this outline of like, how do we want people to go through this, right? Like what is this? And we want to walk you through step by step, like the value proposition, how you can imagine using it. Want to showcase the product. So we definitely thought about what are the best practices, but we also thought about, well, how can we present it differently, contextually, within the context of a wider narrative.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to ask one more thing, or I was kind of going to ask, so you've been building this product with people and you've been recording it. And I think that's probably the first time. And so a lot of our audience is sales and marketing. A lot of them record their stuff on Gong, but like, this is probably like the first time that you've built a product with like, you can go back into your recording software and see what the person said and what the feedback was. So how did that shape the messaging, the positioning of the product on the website?
Yeah, I mean, it had a huge effect, right? We couldn't have built this website a year ago, 2 years ago, without learning what the pain is and what resonates with people. And so, even though, I mean, we're not launched yet, it's still in early access, right? It's a while away before it's generally available. We launched as a website, but in this entire time, we have been talking to many customers, including yourself, and trying to figure out what resonates. And one of the big things that resonates is this idea that you are on a spreadsheet today. You start on a spreadsheet, right? And at some point you're going to feel pain, and you're feeling pain now. And the choices available to you are extremely heavy experiences designed for very large enterprises. That's not designed to be accessible, which is why they don't show up the product. And so that's going to be painful. And so you put off that pain, and you deal with the pain of being a spreadsheet for way longer than you want to. And what you're looking for is something more accessible, one, that you can switch to more quickly. But two, the other pain is so much of your time as a model owner is in working with other people, getting input from the sales department, or how much the engineering department is going to spend reporting up to the board and CEO. And that effort becomes incredibly time consuming because we maintain a bunch of different versions and scenarios. And so those are the specific pains that we want to highlight. We want people, when you're in that persona, to understand that we feel your pain, we understand it deeply, and here is visually exactly how we solve it.
Cool. Adam, you had something you wanted to ask?
I did. I think Siqi just answered it, but I'll let him expand on this just a little bit. You know, you are in many ways, you have a really cool product, and you also have a classic B2B marketing problem in that you are selling into people who have probably done things the same way for 10, 20, maybe 30 years of using, Excel or other tools. And I'm curious, any advice you'd have for maybe, say I'm a young startup founder and I have a product and I'm trying to sell into an industry that's sort of calcified, stuck in their ways. I know my solution's better. I have my benefit statements, but I'm just not breaking through, even though I know my product is 2 to 3x better. Is there any wisdom you could impart on another young founder, maybe doing something else from what you've learned?
Yeah. A piece of meta advice I think about a lot is the advice that is most worth paying attention to is the most obvious of advice. Because if it was obvious and easy to execute on, it would no longer need to be advice. And my advice is you should talk to your customers deeply and understand your pain. What we found is that finance people have pain, and they understand that a spreadsheet eventually does not scale, and they're already looking for something different. How we assume that finance people are these ossified, old skeletons who don't want to switch, then we would have never built Runway. And once we talk to the finance people, they're the ones who are saying, I'm spending so much time maintaining this model. I'm spending so much time updating this data, updating the model with actuals data, and I don't even understand it anymore. It's no longer maintainable. And I know I have to get something different. I want to do better things with my time. I want to be more strategic within the company. And those are problems that we are equipped to solve because they told us that, and we learned those things. And so if it is the case that you're building a product for what you believe to be an ossified demographic, I would suggest that you probably don't understand them deeply enough and empathetic enough with their pain to actually solve problems that you want to get solved.
Interesting. Yeah, that's, I've, on the agency side, I definitely sat on, when I was a consultant, in the shoes talking to people who didn't want change. So MedTech is one where none of the, we would launch new products for, it doesn't matter now, it was years ago, for McKesson. And our users almost didn't care. It was marginally better. And, I could have whatever benefits, but they didn't even talk to their customers very much. So it's probably a little bit different with anesthesia management than spreadsheets where, these people have their daily pain. But, there's definitely industries where you work in marketing and you are sending messages to people who don't want change. But to your point, that might not be the best area for a startup, right? You might just not be able to post a W in that situation.
Yeah, I think it's worth, it's a lot of building something great is about aligning incentives and doing two things at once and being creative. So it reminds me of a problem, when I was running growth at Postmates was an extremely brand sensitive type of company. And so I remember when I joined, I was told that A/B testing was not allowed. In fact, it was not even allowed to be said in the organization. That's not how we do things. We don't believe in A/B tests. And I'm running growth. So imagine running growth under those circumstances. And so what we ended up doing is, we didn't have an A/B testing framework because it was a bad word. So I built one anyway. The team built one rather. I didn't actually contribute any code to it. And what we did is we branded it a rollout framework. And the messaging was, this is not an A/B test framework. This is simply the thing they use to roll things out in order to figure out what actually happened. And they're like, okay, that seems like reasonable. That seems like a reasonable thing to do. And so, and the reason why that was effective is people, saw that the growth team meetings were able to say, hey, we did this, and here's like what happened. And people are like, oh, okay, that seems a useful thing to understand what happened. So we're going to do that now. And now everything was at least up to a year after I left was rolled out with a rollout framework. So I think there's a lot you can do to be creative to get people to a better place if you understand incentives well enough and willing to be creative.
I love hearing stories of when someone on the team knew the right thing to do was something, and they did it regardless of what the highest paid person's opinion said. I think that in a lot of cases, for startups, like even if they say one thing, they kind of hired you to be a little bit of a leader if you're like in an area and you know best. And sometimes, like working around politics, it does, not all the time, but sometimes it does require you to sort of be the rogue spy and just do the thing that needs to be done, the sort of Jack Bauer-esque.
Well, I mean, I think that's the best way to play politics. I think, people say politics is a bad thing. I think politics is just reality. It's just what it is. When you have more than 3 people in the room, it exists. And so, if you disdain it, then you're unable to manage it. And managing it is part of anyone's job as a leader, if you want to be a leader, right? And so when I think about how you acquire influence, it doesn't get handed to you with a title, right? A title comes with the influence that you already accrued. But the mental model that I have for that is, you're basically playing poker, right? You have like a certain amount of like social capital. And with every bet that you make, you're like putting your chips in. And if you're wrong, you could lose those chips. But if you win, you get more chips. And that is, I think, how it works. And so it can be a superpower to not be afraid to get fired because you're willing to play poker. You're going to go all in and say, I believe this is going to work. And if it pays off, then you are a leader. And I think not enough people think about their roles in that way, right? They kind of want a rubric, a ladder to climb, but that's not how it's actually done in the real world.
I love that. The poker analogy is great. I think thinking in bets, as Annie Duke has said,
Yes.
there's a great book written by her on, is a great way to think about it, especially a marketing org. When you're data driven, you're just making bets with an ad spend or a new program or, an A/B test. A/B test is literally making bets, right?
Right. Right. Exactly.
So I got a question kind of going back to that March 2020 instance of Sandbox VR and the Nexus 4 Runway. And so the world changed. It feels like the world's changed on us about every 6 months since March 2020. I still have hair, but it's falling out quickly. But would you say that the days of like 12 to 18 month planning cycles are just out the window now? And sometimes founders get asked the question, why now? So I guess if I may, why now?
For Runway in particular, why now?
Yeah.
Obviously, there's the economic headwinds and fundraising, but I mean, we didn't. That's not why we started Runway. Mm-hmm. I'm a product person, so I think about it in those terms. Mm-hmm. It calls back to being inspired by products like Coda, Airtable, Notion, Figma. Mm-hmm. And what I'm seeing about products like that is that they've pushed forward the efficient frontier of what is possible between accessibility and flexibility and power. So traditionally, you can build incredibly powerful, complex products that are not accessible, or you can build very simple, easy to use products that are not particularly powerful, flexible. But when I think about like Notion, you can build pretty complicated workflows, structures, but it's still incredibly accessible. Figma is actually similar. I think about Figma in almost the same bucket as Notion. They've exposed the power of software engineering concepts like polymorphism and inheritance in the form of components and made it incredibly accessible for design. And so because they've proven that this is now possible, that's what inspired the work on Runway, where finance is at least as complicated as any of those problems, arguably like more complicated. You're modeling the workings of an entire business and everything in it. And so it's supposed to be complicated, but can we figure out what the right workflows and primitives and data structures to create such that it is accessible. Like you can look at it and it's like, okay, I can intuit how it works. And that requires invention and requires a lot of time. But that's the thing that really inspired it in 2020.
Yeah, we're users of Figma, and I have to say, I'm not a professional designer, and they make it so easy that I can go in and get exactly what I need, and it looks professional. And I love what you said about abstracting away the complexity, but not killing the power inherent to what people need to do.
Yeah, that's right.
So you have this insanely incredible product. Sorry, I'm going to keep tooting your horn because I've seen it. But anyway, so you have all these different personas that you can go after. How do you think about, which ones to go after first? How do you prioritize your go-to-market efforts? Are you selling into the finance person, or is it marketers who hate doing the forecasting stuff themselves that are coming to you, or what does that look like?
Yeah, it is. The chief buyer is the head of finance, the person who owns that model. Mm-hmm. But what we found resonates is we have a pretty strange GTM strategy where we're actually marketing significantly to operators, founders, CEOs, because that's a persona I understand, but they also have the pain, right? A lot of the impetus for Runway 2 is born out of personal insecurity of mine. And a lot of founders just don't understand finance. My first company, I hired a financial interim CFO, and every month I would just get these spreadsheets on inbox and pretend to know what I'm talking about. I didn't even really know what contribution margin even meant until I was responsible for the metric at Postmates. It's like, what is this? And now that I understand it a little bit better, I understand that, okay, this is actually not complicated. Out of all the things you do as a technical founder or a product person, finance is not the most complicated thing, but it is cloaked with lots of very hard to understand terms of art. And so you think it's confusing. One of my favorite descriptions of Runway came from one of our investors. When we announced a seed round, he tweeted, "When I invested in Siqi's first company 12 years ago, that was a game company, he didn't know how to read an income statement. And 12 years later, he still doesn't. And in order to fix this problem, he's literally going to start a company," which is not actually untrue. But yeah, I think that's why we market also to operators, because they have this pain. And they're also frustrated with not being able to understand this stuff better. And what we've seen is that at some scale, you have a full-time finance person, you get excited about this product, you can imagine how you're going to get value out of it as a CEO, as a founder. And then you bring your head of finance or model owner in, and they're kicking the tires. And now we built a bunch of features to make their lives easier. And they're like, okay, I can see how this is valuable and better. And now everyone's excited. So that's more or less our average motion today.
Cool. And so were there any things that you would have done differently in the rollout? Some learnings that you can share with the audience, if any?
With the website?
Yeah. Website, go to market, the launch.
Yeah, I probably would have waited. We did not expect to blow up like that in any way. We silently launched it. And then meanwhile, we have a few new headcount open. So I thought, hey, I'm just going to tweet out the website, get people to check out the jobs page. Because we have some more announcements coming up that are pretty significant, which I'm not ready to talk about over the coming months. But yeah, so I probably would have waited and get your real headshots into the website before it blew up. It wasn't ready. It had a photo of the creative director of the firm in place of Chris's head, right? So probably
good looking mustache. I'm telling you.
Could have just done an emoji or something for Chris. Yeah. He doesn't look bad.
Other than that, it accelerated, our sort of go-to-market results by quarters. We really didn't expect to be here. So we're very much trying to play catch up today. So it's hard to say what could have gone better in terms of impact, but I probably would have waited a little bit longer.
Cool. That's good to know. Adam, should we keep going on Runway, or should we jump into our next topic, which I know Siqi has been exploring LLMs and AI and all that good stuff on Twitter, and I think he's a great person to.
Are we going to ask when the universe is going to be bricked, or do you want to ask that question, or should we not?
You want to leave with that? Go for it.
When the universe will be bricked.
No, we don't need to go into the doomer conversation too much. I guess, are you a doomer? Are you a bloomer? Where do you say?
I am in superposition. I think I stole that term from Naval when last we talked, but I am in superposition between the two. I think, Mark made a pretty good argument for why that won't happen, I think, yesterday. And Mark's definitely far smarter than I am. I thought his first draft, his first thing, was not particularly persuasive, and it's kind of hand wavy on why it won't happen. So my own sort of intellectual history is I was pretty big on doomerism, probably maybe mid last year or so, but I'm slowly coming closer to not being that. I think the smartest people that I know, biology and Mark Andreessen, Naval, I think are becoming a little bit more optimistic. I think the thing that's made me more optimistic than anything is that paper recently that OpenAI published around using GPT-3 to analyze the neuron by neuron, parameter by parameter, layer by layer, the workings of GPT-4. GPT-4 to use GPT-4 to analyze GPT-3, and so that's kind of interesting. It suggests that we can do more to understand how the model actually works than previously thought. And there is a pretty big argument to be made that as AI gets better, before it gets to a super critical, where it can just improve on itself and it runs away, there's enough power that existing AI systems, as we grow with it, will be able to help us align the AI, and we'll have sufficient warning. So it might be sort of a slow takeoff scenario, which gives me a lot more reason for optimism. But I also could talk for many hours about why all the things that could go wrong, even in that world.
I love it. That's actually really interesting that I'll have to read the paper on using AI to help align AI. It's actually really smart. We had a fellow Liran Shapira on a past podcast episode here, and he's full on doomer. He thinks that a future AI is going to decide to what did he was saying something about not just bricking the universe, but maybe some sort of engineer a virus where there'll be a tone plate and we all just fall over. And I think everyone's watched a little too much sci-fi. I think we're anthropomorphizing the machines. I don't think there's any reason that I think worst case would be some sort of virus-like thing, right? You could see that's the most plausible one to me, but the bricking the universe thing, it's a little sci-fi. They kind of lose me when they get into that too far. I think even before that happens, though, we'll get all sorts of cool stuff, right? We'll get new molecule drugs for rare disease. We'll get hopefully cool, efficient energy technologies. New kinds of planes and transportation, things we haven't even thought of yet.
Yeah.
So I think it's everyone wants to speed run to the doom thing because we're tech and we have to go to the end game of what it all means. Sure. But there's probably a few steps, even if you're listening to this and you're a doomer, there's some cool stuff that'll probably happen before then. So
the next 5 to 15 years is going to be the most fun we've ever had. Anyone's ever had, just whether it's being in tech or just consuming entertainment, it's just going to be incredible. You will be able to play any video game, enjoy any fantasy in your Star Trek holodeck. It's going to be amazing. And what happens after that, one of two things will happen of this, I am fairly sure. Either everyone's going to die or all going to live forever.
Yeah, the living forever one is really interesting. A lot of tech people really want to live forever. I'm actually in the live forever camp, but I would hope that the tech people also spend a little bit of time reading some of the humanities, because there are also pitfalls with living forever that I think you should be aware of before you root it on. I'm still for it, but I think there's some people who are I've seen Elon tweet things where you're just going to get stuck in your thinking. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that's a choice you could make. Yeah. There's legal psychedelics could help reset you. Maybe you don't just have one career, you're not just in tech, but You also become a painter. You also become a doctor. You also become an explorer, right? Like, so we're stuck in this mental model of like, one career and like, there's disruption in it and you want change and you want turnover. But if we lived a different way because we had more time, I think like you could rethink some of the pitfalls for living forever that people talk about. And I just don't think a lot of the tech people think about that stuff because they're so like, we're a little bit constrained in our thinking. We're like all sort of engineers, and it's like you want the old guard to burn off in engineering to think about, solving things in new ways. So I think some humanities would help some of these people.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I also used to think that maybe this like living forever thing isn't so great. People are going to be bored, but I think I watched a talk by Aubrey de Grey, which is pretty like one of the leading people trying to cure death and increasing lifespans of people. And he made two really good arguments, which is like, one, if you have the option to cure death, like that decision should be morally left to the individual person. Like who are any one of us to determine whether other people should live or die? So that's like one pretty good argument. And the other one is like, okay, what is a moral, like, how do you think about like the morality of like living forever, of curing death? And he had a really good argument I found really compelling, which is like, okay, well, death is bad because it kills people, and killing people is bad. I'm like, that, okay, yeah, that's.
I think
argue against.
I think the clause of optionality is important. So like, even if you were an engineer, if you were to think about it from like even a software design perspective, like the notion of being able to opt out is like a real thing in software. Like you can opt out of software that you don't like. So why would you, like, you would want to be able to keep playing the game or opt out. And that would be like, the technological singularity, not the, Rocco's basilisk, you're stuck in this thing and you don't even know it, but like, okay, you've got some control, you're now at like the God level of playing, right?
Right. Yeah. It reminds me of, if you watched, I don't know if you watched The Good Place. It's a really funny show.
It's a great show.
But the ending of that show, right? Like they've done everything there is to do. And now you can, they choose to go on to the next thing, right? People have that choice.
That was optimistic sci-fi. I found that show to be refreshing because we have so much of Hollywood is dystopian sci-fi, and I think on like an unconscious level, Hollywood doesn't love the fact that tech has been eating their lunch for 3 decades now, and so there's like this unconscious bias that the future, if it's tech, it has to be negative, even though that's not really the case, and tech is helping, raise people out of poverty and helping cure disease and all these good things. So The Good Place, I thought, was actually, it was cool because it was optimistic sci-fi, and also it was taking moral philosophy and putting it in a format that like I find moral philosophy boring, but they made it like super interesting, right?
Sure. Very true. Yeah. Great show.
So let's jump back into like business use cases, because the life and death talk is kind of making me bummed out. But so going back to launching the product, so AI, how has your day-to-day changed? How have your work behaviors kind of evolved since we've had like these tools put in our hands like ChatGPT?
It's made my work more fun. I mean, it is right now an incredible. I read a tweet recently. If the computer is a bicycle in mind, this is like a jet engine for the mind, which is like pretty good. It does feel that way. I've been writing some code recently, also AI related code. So I wrote this bot in our Notion where it's called Jam Session. So you add the bot Jam Session, and then you say with Steve Jobs, with Elon Musk on any Notion document. And that person would then come in and critique your document in the personality of this person through comments. And I was able to hack that thing together from scratch in like an afternoon because GPT-4 exists. I was like, here's the thing I want to create. How do I do it? And it knew how to use a Notion API. It told me like how to deploy a Replit, how to like, it was amazing. And it like wrote most of the code, and like it didn't, it wasn't completely working, But like, yeah, it was enough for me to get started and fix problems really quickly. Got it done in an afternoon. And that's like wild, right? Like that thing would have taken like 10,000 engineers 10 years ago, and it still wouldn't have been possible.
That's crazy. That is basically an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Barclay made a simulation of Einstein in the holodeck with him to critique his mathematical formulas. So what you're saying is right now, like the thing in like another thing from Star Trek is actually possible.
Yeah, it's in production, and we have it internally at Runway.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
With Steve Jobs. I'm trying to get what I do next is like ingest all of my writing, so like everyone can have a jam session with Siqi without me spending any time on it. So it's a fun toy. I also wrote, so like it's just been fun to build things with GPT, right? We qualify all of our inbound leads with GPT, so we can tell, okay, like based on this clear bit information in the form, do they have more than 50 employees? Do you have a finance person, et cetera, et cetera? What is your job title? Are they qualified? And then take that information, and I should read maybe the actual prompt I created. I'll pull it up in a bit. But basically, like I prompted it to draft an email, a very, very clever email that references our company and what we know about that company, and creates a one-liner so it looks like it's like handwritten, and we use that quite a bit as well. So we use it quite a bit, GPT in general. I'm pulling it up now. Okay, so the prompt is, hey, you're a phenomenal copywriter that will examine raw customer data and personalize below template. You should return a full copy of the template, not just a snippet. It is extremely important that your snippet is authentic, irreverent, casual, edgy, clever, witty. Just one short sentence. Be genuinely extremely clever, funny, witty. Don't flatter, just be clever. Don't be a flatterer. Have it come off as insincere. The snippet should combine the specifics of this person and what the business does with what we do at Runway, which is a modern, intuitive FP&A platform people actually love, with some extremely smart, clever, witty wordplay or creative reference that tastefully, subtly, cleverly connects Runway with their business. And so then I'll draft an email, put it in my draft, and then I just click send if they qualify. So stuff like that. In general, we're thinking about AI in two ways. One is we're at a point where we're starting to think about scaling, but how can we use AI before we have 1 million people to increase the leverage of every person? Like my dream is maybe Runway will never have to be greater than 50 people. Like as AI capabilities exponentially increase in the next few years, maybe we can just like grow with it instead. And so we're thinking about a lot of like operational use cases like this, because this would have been actually multiple people.
Yep.
Right. Like to draft the outgoing email, to qualify them. I mean, we're getting like, N number of leads a minute, right? Like that's just way too much. So that's one. And the other piece is obviously how we can apply it to Runway. And there's a few thoughts here. One is I just think the chat interface is kind of played out. I think it's overused. Like the problem with chat is that it requires someone to remember to be able to chat. And I think that's a very difficult behavior change. I mean, we're slowly getting there. But two, I think it underutilizes like AI in the sense that if you have a really good interface, there's a lot of things AI can do on the back end, like almost like a team member to help you rather than waiting for you to talk to it. One great example is like Diagram that the company that Figma recently acquired. One of the things is like, instead of just like, a chat where you can give me the design, what they have is an actual AI teammate that's going around and like copying, pasting for you and drafting. Those applications are like a lot more interesting and natural to me. So that's like one aspect. And the other part is I think of GPT as a intuition pump. Like it's very good at sort of like intuition and common sense in some ways. But what is really bad at is doing math. And so Runway is a product that happens to be very good at doing math. It's like a basic calculator. So basically, how can we hand this intuition engine and calculator and have it do a lot of different things that maybe a financial analyst, a CFO, a chief of staff would typically do. And so that's the other big direction. But yeah, we are definitely, as you can imagine from my Twitter stream, all in on AI.
I think a lot of people are really excited about using AI to do, I think, any of the repetitive, not super fun, not super fulfilling tasks, so it can level your team up to do ultimately
Totally.
the things that your team is excited
Yeah.
about working on, the creative
Yes.
work, the sort of the things that the AI can't do. I feel like that's like the most fun things for a human to do. And
Oh yeah,
so
totally.
my only fear is this becomes like this infinite receiving line.
Correct.
And I guess I think that's still more of a concern in the raw creative space if you're like a musician or you make TV shows or movies, versus I think in the business world there's not really a line. Like you want to always be doing more creative stuff anyway, so I don't think like we have that problem, but I worry in the media industry a little more.
Oh, I think everyone's going to have that problem. Like, I think, I think that's sort of my worry too, which is everyone is pretty comfortable talking about AI, and the positive view is that it is a tool, a bicycle for the mind. It's going to make everyone it's going to make work more fun and everyone more expressive. 10x engineer making him 100x, and that's true in the short term. But like people, it's going to make you a better painter, make you a better comedian. But people forget that it's going to get better, and at some point it's going to be funnier than you, more creative than you. It will. It's already like smarter than you in a large number of domains, at least more knowledgeable, right? Mm-hmm. And so, what happens in a world where it actually can be more creative? That is not a special thing. I think to the extent that it's special, it is special in the sense that we as human beings, we each have a unique path through life, experiences that we have that are personal to us. Until computers can do that, it's going to be hard to get there, but it'll get there too.
I think it's I've thought about this too, but if AI gets to the point it could like replace like you or Chris, I think we won the game. I think at that point, like the AI like can go to work doing insane things, and we're all going to win anyway, and we can sort of figure out like what that means for work, what that means for everything else. So like I thought about this. I think any like near-term nihilism gets killed when you consider, I can like have like something that's smarter than the smartest physicists working on these crazy problems. And it's like, hey, like Elon's like, we're going to become house cats. I'm like, no, we'll figure out interesting games to play. And these are like first-class problems to have.
Yeah, I think the one framework too that makes me a little bit more optimistic is that, so the pessimistic view to that would be, okay, but what will be even meaningful to do if AI can do anything? It can paint, right? Like you're not going to be a better painter than it. So are you going to have any meaning?
But as humans, we might discover, and I know you're going to say the AI can do this, but as humans, we might discover our imperfections is what's interesting, right? It's like if you were to see like a really, really modern interior of a house, someone might love that, but then someone else might love the old world home in Italy that's got like 100 years of character in it. That you could have the AI do that too for like digital art, but it's kind of not exactly the same. So
I actually agree with that, right? I was gonna say the more optimistic view, but I would frame it as like, I don't think it's imperfections that make it interesting. I think it's authenticity, realness that becomes more valuable. So when you think about a world where AGI exists and it can do anything, the things that become more valuable become handcrafted by humans. Like if you could invest in like, your neighborhood restaurants as an asset class, I think the value of that goes up significantly.
Yeah. The other thing that's kind of cool is AI is already better than any human at chess, and humans still play chess. So it doesn't ruin the fun of that game.
Yes, exactly. I think that's the other optimistic argument, which is that no matter how capable AI is, what should we call it? What's Warren Buffett's Charlie Munger. Charlie Munger had this great insight, right, about what makes a society go around, what motivates people. And people think capitalism is motivated by greed. And he said it's not. It's motivated by envy. By someone else having more and able to have higher status than you in society, which I thought was amazing insight. And so regardless of what AI can do, that dynamic still exists. And so there'll still be like competition between people and AI is a tool to have you be. It is somewhat of a bicycle, and will be a bicycle for you to figure out who is most good at cooperating with AI to get the best possible outcome.
I am excited for, and the Doomers will kill me on this one, but I'm excited to be able to play like paintball with like AI robots that are like, you can change the difficulty setting, and like you can like fill out a team. Like I could have like my own team versus Chris or whatever. There's like so many cool things like that. And now that we have all this empty office space, we have like open places for like paintball or laser tag arenas that we can
build,
so.
Totally.
Well, I know a guy who's pretty well versed in that department.
Yeah. Make them all sandbox VRs, just like building tall holodeck. That'll be pretty rad.
Be cool.
I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes a thing. Anyway, we're coming up to an hour. Should we wrap soon, or what are we thinking, guys?
Yeah, Siqi, we'll flip this because we know that you know us and AdQuick really well. For our guests that are intimate with us, we let you ask Chris and I a question. So if you have one for us, if not, we can wrap.
Yeah, I want to know how you guys are applying AI AdQuick.
Yeah, so we think about it in the similar fashion as you do, internally, and then how we can use it to improve the product. We're also a small team. We're like 30. Everybody on the sales and marketing team pretty much has a license to chat GPT. Initial use cases were like classification and summarization of data sets. We're using AI to inform our cold outbound strategies. So like, hey, what matters to this business, right? So we'll use AI to digest a 150-page 10K, which used to require actually skimming through and finding out what the company's goals are for this year and how they think they're gonna achieve that. Now we can get that summarized nicely, succinctly, and we can communicate that we understand what's important to the advertiser when we reach out to them and say, hey, you can have this channel available, and it's lower cost than most digital ones, and it's just as measurable. So we're using on the sales and marketing front, I'll speak to that because I don't have great visibility onto how our product team is using it as part of their, I don't know if they're using Copilot or not, or how they're thinking, how they're using that in their day-to-day. But on the sales and marketing team, it's pretty much permeated everything that we do. We just, Adam, you could probably touch on this for like the product perspective, but we've already shipped an AI assistant.
Yeah, we trained it on all of our proprietary data. So you can ask, like, I'm a startup in New York. How much would it cost to, run my first billboard campaign? Things like that. You could ask it. Yeah, so you can ask it like out-of-home specific questions. It's cool. The AdQuick team already had built calculators. So we've already like put this data together, but because it's so easy now, it's like there's zero reason not to let your users have a, command line interface to ask questions. And it's kind of fun. So,
the reason we built it is like, we've been in this space, we're not advertising people, we are software people first. And so one of the things that we notice is that it's a very out of home, and most advertising businesses are sales driven. And so what that means is like, if you're trying to do your own research, there aren't very many resources available to you to learn about, hey, how much does this cost? How many people own this type of format in a given market? How much should I spend? Whatever, right? And so at first we started creating, part of my responsibilities was to create the content that answers a lot of these basic questions that were, typically gated behind like a salesperson who wanted to sell you a bunch of stuff that maybe you didn't need at the time, or so on and so forth. But this is the next evolution where you have a trained professional at your side that'll answer any question that you may have. It's still in beta, the AI assistant, and we're still kind of working through the kinks of like the hallucinations. Have you figured out how to get around that? Anything you could share, because it loves imagining new URLs that don't exist. In our case, here's where you could go learn more, and it's like a 404, right?
Yeah. I mean, Yeah. So the way we think about that is, if we just ask like GPT-4, hey, how can I improve revenue? Without telling it what happened, like some sort of ground truth, it's going to imagine random things. And so that's basically how we solve it, which is we put it into a loop and we give it feedback from the real world, right? And so for things like that, typically what you can do is you say, hey, this is not a real URL. And then you can fine tune it, save that information, and it'll get better over time.
Oh, there's an idea. Adam, we should just feed it. I spider the entire website. We should just feed it the corpus of every single URL that we have with the title tags.
Yeah.
I think that should solve the problem. Siqi, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, you can just embed, you actually embed your entire website, right? Like in embeddings. And so like the typical flow that I've seen for a solution like that is like you embed all of your content, and it's a two-phase thing. First, you do a search through the embeddings for the query. So it'll take a query, match, return the pieces of content that match that query. And then you take that content and say, hey, this is the ground truth content that we have. Take that context and answer the question.
Awesome. Okay. So Adam, it sounds like we got some work to do, my friend.
This is a podcast. This isn't a work meeting, Chris. But
I
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to slack you right after this. Anyway.
Of course.
Get after it.
All of our listeners get a viewpoint into Chris tasking me, which is fine. I like Chris tasking me. He cracks the whip, keeps us organized.
Yeah. Anyway, well, thank you, Siqi. I think this is a great stopping point. But you're an amazing person to follow online. Where can people find you? Where can people learn more about Runway?
Yeah, Runway's at runway.com, and I'm primarily on Twitter, Blader, Blader. That's it.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining. Adam, anything you want to add?
I'll remind subscriber or watchers and listeners, if you haven't already, please like, comment, subscribe in the buttons below. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.